which usually are discussed with the authorities, the relevant bodies of the country. So I think this is also one of the further steps that we envisage.
Thank you. Mark Phillips of CBS News. In an imperfect world, do you consider this result to be, given the pre-election opinion poll numbers, a legitimate or an illegitimate result?
Oh, Mr. Pizzol. Yeah, I guess we all agree that we are not talking about ideal world, but the second best, maybe, yes. I think we have been clear that these elections did not meet important democratic commitments, but it's not up to OSCE and other organizations to place any label on the winners and the losers of these elections. We are not here to comment candidates or outcome, but campaign, legislation, procedures, access to medias. Are they in compliance with agreed international standards or not? And we find out that in many aspects, Russia commitments to all these standards remain unfinished. It's our general assessment.
Nicholas Twiddle from the Moscow Times. Some of us were at an event with Alexei Navalny and Garry Kasparov last night. And early in the morning they said the elections have shown that this country is ruled by an illegitimate president, by an illegitimate parliament, and practically both have usurped power. I understand the answer that you have just given about the framework of your work, but what do you think this will mean for the future political process in this country? Thank you very much.
If we knew that, Nicholas, we would be rich. So what we only can say, what are the lessons learned from these elections according to us? And I refer to it, Madam Tagliavini spoke about it, and Mr. Pizzla spoke about it. And of course, it's entirely right of everybody to comment on the elections. Mr. Navalny, Mr. Kasparov, and Mr. Putin, they are all entitled to comment. But we like to stick to the factual things that we observed, and then we say that these elections lacked an equal competition, lacked an impartial referee, and on the other hand, were marked by a far greater civic involvement and a great attitude of so many observers.
Yes, I want to add just one sentence, of course, adding what just Mr. Cox had said. We are not here to take a side. I want to be absolutely clear. We are here to observe and monitor process. And of course, what will happen in the future, near future in Russia, is up to people and the elected leadership, and of course the opposition.
Road to Liberty, my question is directed to Mr. Cox. In January, when the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe decided not to have urgent debates after Russian Duma's elections, it was said that if there will be the same level of fraud in present elections, it will be inevitable that you will have urgent debates. Is at that level that you will have urgent debates, or you think it will be rather no? Thank you.
It is not up to me, Danilo, to decide on what the Assembly should do or should not do. It is clear that we are still working, as Ambassador Tagliavini said, on the results of election day. Until now, it looks at least slightly better than in the State Duma elections. That is progress, but we will report on that. That will be an element to decide whether or not to have an urgent debate in Strasbourg in April. Another thing that our Assembly possibly might do is to conclude that there were so many promises made, so many demands made, and so many questions asked, that it's worthwhile to come back to your country in a short notice, I say within a month before the next part session of our Assembly in Strasbourg, in order to make it possible to decide whether or not to have an urgent debate. Anyhow, We will debate Russian elections in April part session, and we will debate developments in Russia in September, when the monitoring report will be presented. But it's not now up to me. I'm the member of the presidential committee, but we have so many presidents and we have so many important people there. They all will take part in the decision. So I cannot answer the question, but we will surely talk about Russian elections in April.
Thank you.
Anastasia Lotin, Voice of America Russian Service. Your mission has been here for 6 months, 6 weeks. Have you met the expectation? Like, what have you seen during the election day? Like, have you expected that during your mission before? And the second question is, almost no cases in the courts after the Duma election were satisfied. Do you expect something better will happen after this election? Thank you.
As an election observation mission, we don't come here with expectation, except for the standards that we are actually trying to find compliance with. We came with a standard election observation mission that looks into the whole framework around, in all aspects around the election, pre-election campaign, legal framework, and the expectations part is actually our assessment. It has nothing to do with expectation. It is an observation, and it is also not a political assessment of what we are going to observe. It is rather a technical assessment whether all the aspects of the electoral process are in compliance with Copenhagen standards and with international commitments and also with national legislation. So in as far we can't really speak about expectations. And as I mentioned before, when we establish our final report, all our observation will in some way end up in recommendations, and they will be further discussed with the host country.
I would like.
Sorry.
I would like just to add that electoral monitoring system is not about wishful thinking. It's just even better to come to country before you're observing elections without any prejudices. What you need to do is to check whether standards in the country are complied with international standards.
It's Matthew Collin, AFP. What influence do you think the mass protests in the run-up to these elections had on the way the authorities actually conducted the elections?
As I already said, the civic engagement in these elections really did matter. It led, for example, in our opinion, to the substantial proposals of Mr. Medvedev to change, to simplify and modify the rules on party registration and presidential candidates registration. If that would become reality in Russia, that would be a big step forward. That is one. Second, thanks to the civic movement and thanks to the fact that so many people volunteered, many for the first time, to be observer in these elections, the elections were observed in a better way. The reaction of the government of the Russian Federation to install all these 200,000 web cameras was a reaction to that civic movement and that call for transparency and fair elections. And furthermore, I think that the voters in Russia were influenced by the protests that they have seen on the television screen. As television is here the main instrument of communication, it has become clear, I think, to many Russian voters that something was happening, some demands were made, and something had to change. So altogether, we should say that this movement had a substantial influence on the electoral campaign. We cannot comment whether it had an influence on the results of the elections.
Thank you.
My name is Christian Esch from the German newspaper Berliner Zeitung. I have a question to Mr. Pops again. I remember last time you were here for the December elections, there were problems in cooperation with the Central Electoral Committee and meetings with Mr. Churov, the Council. I wanted to ask you whether this time it was different, how many meetings were there with Mr. Churov, did they go well? And as a follow-up question, Mr. Churov practically accused some international observers of espionage. He said there is a suspiciously high interest of international observers towards military objects and objects in border areas. How do you comment on that?
First, we are not alien. We are at home here in Russia, because Russia is the biggest member state of both the OSCE and the Council of Europe. So we cannot be meant by Mr. Churov's idea about what people are doing here in this country. That is one. Second, the first time, last time I said to Mr. Churov, I met him several times since December. That is progress. Last time I said to him, Mr. Churov, first you did not want to meet me, and now you don't want to leave me, because he spent so much time in explaining all things that he done. And the positive news is that also the CEC took in account several of the recommendations that we as an election observation mission made. That is progress. And he, in the last meeting last Thursday, he admitted that he took into account our practical observations and recommendations. He did not agree with our political recommendations, but we still are trying to identify what our political recommendations were. As Madam Tagliavini said, we don't make political recommendations. The atmosphere is far better. The first meeting I would not propose to be the standard, because my mother at least learned me how to behave in another way. But since then, our meetings are good, they are professional. Mr. Churov knows what we are and knows what we have to do, that we are committed to standards to which the Russian Federation should apply. And I think we still differ on our conclusion that this great country misses an impartial referee, and you need an impartial referee in order to play the game that's called democracy. Let us hope that also the election observation authorities will learn lessons out of this of this campaign and out of our report. But again, that is up to Mr. Churov and his whole team. And to be clear, we are not focusing on a person, we are focusing on the electoral system as such, and the role of the electoral committees at all levels, as I said.
James Martin from the Irish Times, Ireland. Ambassador Tagliavini mentioned that 1/3 of the counts were either evaluated as either bad or very bad. Was there an even spread of this throughout the country, or were these concentrated in any particular geographical areas? And also, you didn't mention anything about difficulties with access to the protocols or tampering with the protocols. Was this as bad as the last time in December?
Thank you for the question. Yes, indeed, I meant 98 observations of the counting. And this means 98 observations by our observers throughout the country. These are the forms we received with reports and with assessments, and they were assessed as bad, and 1/3 of these 98 were assessed as bad and very bad. Then the rest of the question?
I wanted to know where the irregularities, were the bad and very bad decisions spread evenly throughout the country, or were they geographically concentrated? The other part of the question was that you didn't mention anything about difficulties with the protocol and where there.
You know that one of the measures, or one of the praises for the introduction of the web cameras was that the protocol eventually should be showed to one of the web cameras and read out loudly in front of the camera. And this is an aspect in which we have practically no information so far, whether this worked well or did not work at all. What we have rather noted is that when we say bad or very bad in the counting, that there were procedural difficulties, that there were unrest in polling stations. It took a long time to count. Observers indicated, as I saw it in polling stations, observers indicated procedural mistakes, filed a complaint.